The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Fantasy. Get up to 1K in a pause match with Mark Fantasy with the promo code SGPN. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. It is currently Thursday afternoon, August 7th, around 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm as always, Reichel, once again going solo for this pod. Only one match to break down in this episode, going to be the breakdown of the final in Toronto between Shelton and Khachanov. So we're going to break that down in this one. We already broke down Cincinnati, so if you wanted the breakdown of that event, check out the episode before this one. Did that one last night. Bit of a weird schedule once again, where you actually have the start of an event happening before the end of the previous event. But either way, here we are. Time to break down one match on the card for Toronto. Now, before we get into the actual breakdown of the final, a brief recap of what happened in the last episode. Overall, not good, or I should say the semifinal episode for Toronto. Ended up going 0-2. We did end up having a pretty annoying lock there, which ended up losing, as we had Shelton team total over 12.5 at -136. He won the match outright as a dog, but he won by too much. We had pretty much two lopsided sets. We had a situation where Fritz needed to hold one more time, got broken, then Shelton served for the first set, then he broke immediately in the second set as he ended up coasting to a nice, easy win. So Shelton was plus money, thought he was quite live to win. Unfortunately, Fritz really just got buried, and Shelton went under the team total despite winning, so that's pretty annoying, but it is a loss nonetheless. For the dog, really wasn't that close with Zverev in straight sets at +112. Didn't work out as he ended up losing in straight sets. So, getting into the actual recap of the semis, a brief, I don't want to say detour talking about Zverev because it is connected, of course, to the match that he lost against Khachanov last night. But a brief, I'd say, I don't know if it's an announcement on the pod or something, but I think I've just had enough backing Zverev. I've made arguments trying to find good spots for him, and it's just not worth it. Zverev, we all were critical of earlier in his career for never getting over the hump, never winning a Grand Slam, despite all of the expectations for him to do so in his career. And I feel like one main issue that was common with the criticisms for his game was the lack of either mental toughness or the lack of aggression in big spots. And Zverev ended up making it to the Australian Open final. He lost to Sinner handily in straight sets. And since that point, you figured, okay, he got back to a Grand Slam final. It wasn't as heartbreaking as the loss he had to Thiem in the U.S. Open final in the middle of COVID, where he blew a 2-set lead. But still, you figured he made it back to a final. Maybe he'd be able to build on that. And since then, he's kind of cratered. Now, I know that he won a clay title in Germany, as he was able to beat Shelton in the final in that event. But once again, Zverev has kind of underachieved since the Australian Open final, and a big reason for that is the lack of improvement in his game mentally. And I feel like most people thought that Zverev at some point, just based on just getting tired of losing in these big matches, would eventually be more aggressive at some point. Instead, he's going the opposite way, and he has somehow been even more passive than he was previously, and that was on full display last night. Because Khachanov, I thought, played well. I'm not going to roast Khachanov for winning. I mean, look, at the end of the day, Khachanov served well. He only got broken one time in the entire match, and that's what he needed in order to win. But you're looking at Zverev, who just didn't do enough on a lot of opportunities. You're looking at Khachanov with his second serve points won. He won 52% because Zverev's not doing anything to actually challenge Khachanov with forcing him into uncomfortable situations. He's hitting his returns to the middle of the court. Khachanov's able to take control of the rallies early. And I did think that stylistically, Zverev would be able to get away with it in this matchup because I figured Khachanov's unforced errors would be problematic if Zverev would keep the ball in play. That didn't happen. Khachanov played very well. Now, the unforced errors were an issue for both sides as the match went on, but Khachanov did a good job of taking control of his service points because Zverev wasn't willing to actually push the envelope and get creative with his actual aggression in these long rallies. And Zverev early in the match punted away a ton of free points, which is an extremely, I'd say, paradoxical element to the game because if Zverev's going to go out of his way to limit the risk and go out of his way to attempt shots right down the middle of the court because he's afraid of hitting errors, then you can't be spraying errors all over the court too. So I thought Zverev had a game plan, which was the same that we saw in previous rounds, which was don't beat yourself, let your opponent self-destruct, and just do whatever you can to keep the ball in play. Unfortunately for him, he couldn't keep the ball in play himself, which was an issue early in the first set, and Khachanov played well. Khachanov did not hit many errors, and he was able to take control of the service games that he had. But we know Zverev, whether you like him or not, is objectively a good returner. The fact is, in 3 sets, he only had 2 breakpoint chances in the entire match. So he really didn't do anything in the return game, which I thought was pretty concerning for Zverev's sake. And the fact is, his lack of aggression contributed to that. But nice job by Khachanov to keep his nerve. Zverev, though, just did not really pull the trigger. And the one time, ironically, that he did pull the trigger, it was on match point. He had a second serve, tried to rip a backhand down the line, and of course he ripped it right into the net. So Zverev had a match point on a second serve that was rolled in by Khachanov. He choked it, immediately punted the return into the net, then got broken. He was up a mini break into the breaker, gave it back, lost the breaker. So a pretty classic Zverev choke job. It wasn't Rybakina bad, but it was pretty bad. But either way, Zverev once again just refuses to pull the trigger ever. And the one time he does, of course, he bricks the backhand return right into the net on match point. But nice job by Khachanov getting the job done. I'll see how he does in the final on Thursday. For the other matchup, though, you had Shelton, who dominated against Fritz, as he ended up winning 6-4, 6-3. Never in doubt, you saw a couple of breakpoint chances early for both guys. Then Shelton settled in and did not face a break point for the rest of the match. So Fritz, just for reference, had 2 break points in the first return game of the match, and he had 0 for the rest of the match. Now, Shelton, on the other hand, was amazing. That was probably the best match he's ever played. I thought that Shelton's overall rally tolerance was solid. The shot selection was good. Of course, the serve was solid. Fritz had no answers. Fritz just got destroyed from the baseline. Nothing else to add. I thought Shelton played a really, really perfect match for his standards, and Fritz had no answers. So to go through the stats here, Shelton did win. He won 86% of his first serve points. He won 59% of his second serve points. Once again, not broken in the entire match. As for Fritz, he ended up only winning 69% of his first serve points. He won 36% of his second serve points. So Shelton dominated from the get-go, and after the exchanging of failed breakpoint chances early, Shelton took over and dominated. So Fritz had no chance. I would say Fritz played poorly. He didn't play that well, don't get me wrong, but I thought Shelton played basically a perfect match, and I do think that Shelton is, once again, capable of showcasing the skill set more often than he does. And when he does, you can argue that he is definitely capable of making a Grand Slam final or maybe beyond if he plays as well as he did against Fritz. If he plays that well again in the final, he's going to beat Khachanov, just simply put. Now, I'm assuming that based on Shelton's lack of, I'd say, elite return skills over the course of his career, I am expecting some regression. I don't think he'll play that well again for the second straight day. Now, you could argue if he plays half as well as he did against Fritz, he should win anyway, because Khachanov was against a guy not taking any risks in Zverev, and that played right into Khachanov hand because he was able to locate the serve, he was able to get the forehand, and he was able to take control of the points early. Shelton, whether it's through, I'd say, aggression, which you could argue is poorly timed at various moments, he's going to keep Khachanov uncomfortable, and I feel like that was the main phrase that I'd use for Khachanov over the course of that semifinal matchup against Zverev. He just felt very comfortable. It felt like Zverev never really tried to make it a difficult venture for Khachanov. He never made him run around. He never really implemented drop shots. Khachanov came forward a bit more because Zverev was so willing to just stand well behind the baseline, and Khachanov took advantage of it. But I think Shelton did a great job. He ended up mixing up the shots well with the shot selection. He ended up having a great serve, obviously. Despite only landing 57% of the first serves, he was able to hold easily after the first service game. Yeah, I thought that Fritz just got hit by a buzzsaw. Nothing else to add, and Shelton was, in my opinion, the best player yesterday. We'll see how he does in the final. This would be his biggest title of his career. We'll see if nerves play a factor. Either way, though, nothing else to really add. Thought Shelton was great. Fritz did not play well. I didn't think he was horrible per se. I thought Shelton was just actually hitting every shot he needed to. And normally, we would see Shelton punt away a ton of free points from behind the baseline, which is what Fritz was counting on, and it didn't happen. So nice job by Shelton having a borderline perfect match, and he coasted against Fritz. So that's going to wrap it up for the semis. Time to move on into the actual final for Toronto. Before we get into the actual final, a reminder that we have some NFL team previews, which are out with the network. SportsCam Podcast is back. The 32 NFL team previews. They're also bringing back the phrase that pays. Each episode, they'll give it a word of a 32-word phrase. Submit the phrase for a chance to win a $1,000 circa future. We're brought to you by Nordic Fantasy. They're doing Investment Mania happening all summer long. Giving away 15 million prizes, 2 minute first place, no waiver wire, no trade arguments. Best ones us where to play fantasy football. They also have pick'em options. If you want to do an entry, you have to 500 times your entry to try an underdog for either the fantasy football or for the pick'ems. But when you sign up, though, use the code SGPN to get a special 100% odds match up to 1K. Once again, special pick and first-time deposit offer up to 1K. So if you deposit $1,000, you'll get $1,000 back in bonus credits on fantasy.com, promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by MyBookie.ag. It's available a ton of locations. Using to bet on baseball, tennis, WNBA, golf, and of course football futures. You could use them with crypto for fast payouts and easy deposits for Santo for an account. Use the code SGPN to get 100% of the match up to 1K. Terms and conditions apply. MyBookie.ag, promo code SGPN. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Game Podcast. Finished going through the recap of the semis in Toronto. Time to move on into the final between Khachanov and Shelton. Now, for this one, Shelton is favored. He's about minus 175. For the dog, you have Khachanov at plus 148. For the spread, you have minus 1.5 for Shelton at around minus 125. You have Khachanov plus 1.5 games at plus 110. For the over-under, you have 23.5 games. The over is minus 120. The under is minus 110. For the team total, I see Shelton at 13 flat at minus 130. There are 13.5s out there at plus money. Khachanov at 12.5. The over is minus 125. The under is minus 105. For the set spread, you have Shelton in straight sets at plus 150. You have Khachanov to win a set at minus 200. And you have the over 2.5 sets at around plus 125. So for the head-to-head history, faced off one time this year. Coincidentally, it was actually a pretty straightforward win for Shelton. They faced off on Indian Wells hard court, and you saw Shelton dominate back in March, as Shelton did win 2-0. Now, for the matchup, ended up seeing Shelton win 6-3, 7-5. You saw Khachanov really struggle with the second serve, as you ended up seeing Khachanov only win 35% of his second serve points. So Shelton, you could argue, has a pretty similar game plan to what he did against Fritz in the semis. If he's able to see enough second serves, unlike Zverev, he will not let Khachanov roll in the second serves. He'll be aggressive. He'll force Khachanov to be uncomfortable, and we saw that work out to his benefit in Indian Wells. Now, I do think for the sake of the spot, you could argue that the actual moment is definitely bigger for Shelton, because Khachanov did win a 1,000 title before. It was 7 years ago, but he beat Djokovic in the final. So we know that Khachanov can handle these spots, and we know that Khachanov has been here before. Shelton, not so much. So Shelton's in the biggest match of his career right now. You could argue that the semis of a Grand Slam is bigger in theory. Those didn't go well for him, so we'll see if he can get his biggest title of his young career. Now, a reminder that Khachanov is at 148 as the dog. We have a much better price for the matchup because we have Khachanov at plus 3,000 to win the event. So we're one match away from glory for a plus 3,000 long shot. Hopefully, once again, we cash it. But for the sake of the matchup, do I think Khachanov should be the dog in this one? Honestly, yes. If you want to go through the path of both players, I think Shelton's face off against better competition. Yes, I know Zverev is a top 5 player in the world. Then again, we also know that Zverev has been very, very mentally fragile over the course of his career. And Fritz, you could argue, has been too, but Fritz has been very good in the head-to-head against Zverev, if you want to play that type of argument. So you could argue that beating Fritz in straight sets, I don't want to say is more impressive than beating Zverev, because that sounds disrespectful to Khachanov. But I do think that Shelton winning in the manner that he did against Zverev was, in my opinion, more impressive. Because, I think that him beating Fritz compared to the way Khachanov beats Zverev, I think was more impressive because he dominated. And Fritz, we saw, was serving very well. Shelton broke him a couple of times. And Khachanov was able to win. Not easy. He fought off a match point. He survived. But I do think the level of competition has been easier for Khachanov over the course of the event. Now, beating Zverev, though, is definitely impressive. Nice win for him. Beat Mickelson, beat Ruud, beat Nava, and beat Fikovic. As for Shelton, ended up beating Fritz in straight sets, beat Dimenauer, who was off the DC title, in straight sets as well, beat Kaboli in 3, beat Nakashima in 3 as well, and he ended up beating Manarino in straight sets. So yes, Shelton has dropped some sets. He has definitely buckled down lately, and he was able to beat Dimenauer and Shelton in straight sets in the last 2 rounds. Do think, though, for the sake of comparing serves, I think Shelton has the better serve, especially from a second serve perspective. I think Khachanov's second serve is going to be a problem for him in this matchup, and that's why I think that the price makes sense for Shelton being favored. Now, Shelton, if he plays once again nearly as well as he played against Fritz or even Dimenauer, I think he should win this matchup. But you can argue nerves might play a factor. Shelton might face regression. He might start hitting more errors, and maybe Khachanov can win the match. But I think the price makes sense. I think that Khachanov, at the end of the day, has really not beaten many great players. Beating Zverev in 3 is still impressive, but I think we all know we're all lower on Zverev than I think most people. But Zverev has still been a top 5 guy for most of his, I'd say, career the last few years, and Khachanov still beat him, so impressive. But I think that Shelton's aggression is going to be the story of the matchup here. If he hits a ton of errors and he overdoes it like he did against Fokina, he can lose. But I do think if he's able to find that balance that he was able to find against Dimenauer and against Fritz, I think he should win. So I do think that Shelton's worthy being the favorite. You could argue that the price might be a bit steep at 175. You might argue that 150 sounds about right for his first Masters 1000 title attempt. I do think that you could argue the price is somewhat close to right. I think it's probably too expensive on Shelton, but I agree with him being favored. So I'll go with the Shelton spread instead. I think for the matchup itself, though, I know Shelton did end up beating Dimenauer and Fritz with no breakers and with no 7-5s either. I think you will get a 7-5 or 7-6 in this one. Even the matchup they had earlier this year, there was a 7-5 in there. I think Khachanov been serving very well. I'd say underratedly well in the event, and I feel like I have to give him credit for it because I feel like most people have not really acknowledged how well he's been serving. Because even though Zverev was very passive in those 3 sets, he's still going to make a bunch of returns, and Khachanov still had to win some rallies on his serve. So based on that, you're looking at Khachanov, who has been playing very, very well so far in the event on his serve. To break it down, though, you're looking at Khachanov, who has only been broken one time in the last, well, he's been broken one time in every single round, but the point is he's been broken less than 2 times in every single match. So the fact is Khachanov's been serving well. You might see Shelton get some chances. Will he convert? We'll see. Khachanov's return game, I thought, was pretty underwhelming against Zverev. He had some chances, but we saw him win the one break point that he had in the first 2 sets, basically, and that caused him to win the first set. I thought the return game was not exactly that impressive from Khachanov, and I think that that could be a problem against Shelton, especially if Shelton's hitting the first serve. I do think the second serve, though, will be the undoing for Khachanov. I think he needs a very high first serve percentage, which I'm skeptical of. Give me Shelton to get the job done here with the spread, but I do think there will be a 7-5 or 7-6 in the match, so I don't mind the team total over maybe for Shelton for the 13 at minus 130. But I think Shelton does end up winning. I think he's worthy being favored, and I do think that Shelton, based on the strength of schedule and based on the last couple of rounds, based on eye test at least, has been the better player. So I'll go with Shelton in this one. If I'm wrong, that's fine. I think that Khachanov plus 3,000 is a good consolation prize. But I do think the right person is favored for this matchup. Anyway, it's going to wrap it up for the preview of the final in Toronto. Time to go on into the actual Lock and Dog picks. Before we get into the actual picks, reminder, they're brought to you by our sponsor, Circa, because they're still hosting 3 of the biggest football contests upcoming NFL season. It's Circa Million, Circa Survivor, Circa Grandissimo, over 20 million in guaranteed prizes. You cannot cards for true DGen. If you're not going to compete in Circa football contests, hang out at SGPN at the Circa Contest weekend from the 21st to 23rd of August for an amazing weekend, including live shows and open bars. Plus, you get 15% off your stay at Circa with code SGP15. And a reminder that you can also join the contest open to everyone. Sign up on Nevada, play from anywhere with the help of SGPN's official proxy at footballcontest.com. Use code SGP to get $50 off your proxy fees. We're also brought to you by Rhythm because they have power trends, which are now called smart signals. They've been crushing for WNBA and for MLB. So for the MLB, if you want to look at unders for hitters, they've been quite good at that actual market. For Mike Trout and Giancarlo Stanton especially, the smart signals are 14-0 to the under. So whenever they recommend an under, you might want to back it. But a WNBA, since the All-Star break, the smart signals are 27-16, ROI of over 23%. So check out the smart signals on, once again, Rhythm. And a reminder that you can check out the app for free for a week by using the free trial link that we have with Rhythm in our partnership. Use the link sportsgambling.com's Rhythm to get your 7-day free trial. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Game Podcast. Finished going through the preview of the final in Toronto. Time to move on into the lock and dog picks. For the lock, I'm going to go with Shelton minus the 1.5 games, minus 125. Shelton, I think, has faced better competition. You can argue that Fritz is better than Zverev. I don't know if people would agree with you. There's an argument because Fritz has owned the head-to-head. And on top of that, I know that Zverev made a Grand Slam final in Australia this year. Fritz did make the U.S. Open final last year. So both guys, you can argue, are very comparable. And Shelton buried him like he was nothing. But Shelton, I think, is faced off against better players. I think the combination of Fritz, Dimenauer, Kaboli, Nakashima, and Manarino is better than Zverev, Mickelson, Ruud, Nava, and Fikovic. Faced off against good servers, too, with Fritz, with Nakashima, and he returned pretty well in those matches. I think you're looking at Shelton, who's been the better player over the course of this event, and I do think that Shelton, who's proven he can handle Khachanov, he did so in straight sets on hard court this year in Indian Wells. I think he can do it again. I think he's looked the part. If he looks anywhere near as good as he did in the semis, I think he wins. So I'll go with Shelton, minus 1.5 games here at minus 125 as my lock. For my dog, I am going to go with Shelton again. But I'm going to go with a same-game parlay. Give me Shelton money line with Shelton team total over 12.5 at plus 100. Said before, I am picking one competitive set here, minimum, which should go 7-5 or 7-6. I know Shelton was able to dominate in the last two matches. I think Khachanov serve has been underrated so far in the event. He hasn't broken less than 2 times in each of the last 5 matches, which means we're doing the math at home. There's been at least one set in those 5 matches where he's not been broken. That's what I'm asking for from him here. But Shelton has faced less than 3 break points in 2 straight matches. We saw him face 0 break points after the first service game that he had. So he rolled in those service games. Dimenauer is a great returner. He held mostly, I'd say easily, over the course of that matchup. He got broken one time in the second set. Still, Shelton's been serving well. Khachanav's been serving well too. Think he'll get at least one close set. But I think that Shelton is once again the better player based on current form. He won the first meeting this year, and he went over the team total. And the fact is, Khachanov, I still think with that second serve, it's vulnerable. And that was an issue that he had in that meeting in Indian Wells, where he won less than 40% of his second serve points. I think Shelton's second serve's better. I think he'll be able to create more constant pressure in the return games compared to Khachanov. And for that reason, I'm going to go with Zverev once again. I think Zverev showcased the fact that Khachanov can rally when needed, but I thought Zverev really made life easy for Khachanov by not testing that second serve. And the fact is, Khachanov at some point realized if Zverev's going to be standing all the way back, and if he's not going to be really going for many winners, I know that he choked away the match point going for a winner, I can roll these second serves in. And it felt like there were a bunch of really weak second serves from Khachanov that Zverev didn't capitalize on. I think Shelton will. I think Shelton, whether it's going to go in or not, separate story. I think Shelton will be aggressive. I think he will be trying to take a lead in the rallies by forcing Khachanov on the back foot on the second serve points. And I think that Shelton will find more success than Zverev did in that type of situation. So I think that's enough to win. Give me Shelton in this one. Now, I see Chelsea asking if I'm thinking of hedging Khachanov. I technically am, because I have Shelton for the lock and the dog. I am viewing it without the, I'd say, outright in the back of my mind. I was just breaking down the match based on what I've seen so far. Would I hedge? Probably. I mean, if you want to go for the long shot for glory, I'm rooting for you. I think Shelton's going to win personally. So I guess the answer is yes. You can argue maybe you hope Khachanov can hold or maybe get a better number on Shelton live. If Khachanov holds in the first service game and he serves first, maybe you get Shelton at 150. Maybe he even wins a set and you end up getting yourself a plus money option on Shelton. So I'm not against hedging on Khachanov. A 30-1 would be very nice to win. I think Shelton wins, though. So to answer your question, Chelsea, I'd say probably, but you might want to try to find a better price than 175, which is pre-match, but we'll see what happens. If Khachanov holds a couple times, that price might drop. So there you go. Anyway, once again, for the Lock and Oak picks for the Toronto final, the lock's going to be on the Shelton spread for the games, -1.5, -125. For the dog, I'm going to go with Shelton money line with the team total over 12.5 for Shelton at plus 100. It's going to wrap it up for the show. We're back again for Cincinnati at some point for one of the upcoming rounds. Did an episode already for the outright, so if you want that, check out the episode for this one. I'm on Twitter, Reichel Radio. Good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.